All right, well, hey, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me for this installment in our study. This is The Way of the Word, a modern understanding of biblical truths from the past. And I am Dr. S.W. Kibler. This is a continuation from the previous video, Prophecy 1. This will be Prophecy 2. Now, I want to begin this session by showing you the graphic that I presented last time. And that is this graphic here. And this is of the 70-week prophecy that we looked at in Daniel chapter 9. Now, as I have presented this in person before, it was always surprising to me how few people had really heard how to interpret this prophecy and use the math that we did in the previous video. And sometimes this interpretation using mathematics is called the prophetic code. And it's used to calculate days, weeks, years, and that is used in much prophecy, such as 1 day equals one year, 1 week equals 7 years, and so if you have 7 times 7, that would be 7 weeks times 7 would be 49 years. Now, this is the way that the majority, if not all, of the prophecy that we have in the biblical text and other texts, how it is given. It's not given with a date like April 13th or May 21st, or even with a year, but it's given, as we looked at before, that this is the prophetic code. This is how it is written and how we need to interpret it. And it's not something that's recent. This interpretation is not something recent. It's how it has been determined for many years. I mean, forever. Standard prophetic interpretation. And I know that I've personally taught this for 30 years plus. And just some other references, if you might have heard of Matthew Henry and his commentaries from the 1600s. This is the way that Daniel 9 and other prophecy was interpreted, is by the weeks, by years, weeks, so forth. Same with the Pulp commentary. Jameson, Fawcett, and Brown, Adam Clark in the 1800s used this same interpretation. Also Kaufman and Ryrie, Walford, H.A. Ironside, just to name a few. The reality is much of the Bible prophecy is configured by what is known as jubilees. That is 49 weeks. And a jubilee is 49 weeks plus 1 week, which would be a year, which for a total of 50. Now, what I'm going to give you is a breakdown of the prophetic time in the biblical text. And we need to remember that the Lord God did not use the Gregorian calendar, the one we use today. That's not what he used to deliver prophecy. What he did use was like this. Ages. Biblical prophecy is broken into ages. There are 3, and I know that says 200-year age. They're not. It's 2,000-year. 2,000-year prophecies. So, you know what I need to try to do right now? I won't even try to correct it. We'll just make it there. So instead of 200, just 2,000 years. So an age is 2,000 years, and there are 3 2,000-year ages in prophetic history. And what we're going to do is we're going to put these ages of 2,000 years into roughly our accounting for the Gregorian calendar. Okay, so the first age, the first 2,000 years, goes from creation to 2,000 years. Right, that was the age of, is known as the age of chaos and creation. And for us, roughly, that would be from 3,928 to 1925 BC. The second 2,000-year age was known as the age of Torah, or the age of law. And that would be from 2001 to 4000. And for us, that would be from around 1926 BC to AD 75. AD 75. The third 2,000-year age would go from 4001 to 6000. And that's known as the Age of Grace, where we exist today, the Age of Grace. And that age went from roughly AD 75, 2,000 years forward, would be 2075. So we live today between AD 75 and 2075. We do live in the Age of Grace. There is a fourth age that is only 1,000 years in length. And that then will go from 6,001 to 7,000. Right now, that's years from creation. So it'll go to 7,000 years after creation. That 1,000-year age is what we have referred to, and you may have heard it referred to as the millennial kingdom. The millennial kingdom, which means 1,000 years. This is where we get it. It's the way Bible prophecy has been given to us in the biblical text and other authoritative writings and prophecies. So roughly, that 1,000-year reign of Christ corresponds to our AD 2076 to AD 3075. Okay, 2076 to 3075 AD. Now, when you put the ages together, the three 2,000-year ages and the final seventh of 1,000 years, you get that 7 years, that 7,000 years from creation. And you can't help but notice that that correlates with the 7 days of the week. And on the seventh, that seventh year or the seventh day, right, that is a Sabbath. It's a rest. Okay? So basically that's how that works. Now within these ages of 2,000 years are what are known as onas. And these are made up of 500-year times. Right? So within each age of 2,000 years, there are 4 onas, or 4 divisions of 500 years. Now, each ona, or 500 years, is further divided by what you may be familiar with, the term Jubilee. They're called Jubilees. And those divide the 500-year onas. And a Jubilee is 7 weeks plus 1. Now, using our biblical prophecy code, that would be 49 years plus 1. Right? 49 years plus 1 for a total of 50 years. So there are 10 Jubilees in every ona, every 500 years period of time. There are 10 Jubilees. Now, the Jubilees, those 50-year periods, are divided into what are called Shemitahs. A Shemitah, which is 1 week, which we know equals 7 years. So every Jubilee is divided by Shemitahs, or 7 years. Okay? So that's what a Jubilee is. Now, let's think about what you are probably familiar with. It's called the tribulation period. And just as you recall, how long will that tribulation period last? How long have you been taught that tribulation period will last? And most of you will recall, it's 7 years. Well, where does that 7-year amount of time, where does it come from in the Bible? Or did somebody just make it up? No, it's not fabricated. And here's that. It says the Shemitah. Let me see here. Yeah, each Ona and the Jubilee. So that's just kind of an overview. Age 2,000 years, Ona 500 years, Jubilee is 50 years, and the Shemitah is 7 years. And that's the time for that. That's the part of the code that prophecy was given in. A certain age, and a certain 500-year segment of it, a certain 50-year segment of it, and within that 50 years, a specific 7 years. And some of the prophecy is even more specific, like down to the day within a Shemitah. Absolutely fantastic. But going back to the 7-year tribulation period, it's not something that was fabricated or guessed at. It's actually given to us in the biblical text. We're going to go back to Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 27. And I'm going to read it, and I realize that on the slide here that it's rather small, but that's okay. We'll get to that more bold font here in just a minute. But I'm going to start reading from verse 24 out of Daniel chapter 9. 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, and to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place. Know therefore and understand that from the going out, of the word to restore and build Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks. Okay, so 7 weeks is 7 times 7, so that's 49 years. Okay, and for 62 weeks, so now you have the 62 times 7. It shall be built again with squares and moat, but are in a troubled time. And after 62 weeks, an anointed one that will be cut off and shall have nothing. So we have a 7-week period of time, and then a 62-week period of time. You add them together, you have 69 weeks, right? So that's what we want to look at. There's 69 weeks. And at the end of that, the anointed one will be cut off and have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. And here's the highlighted piece on your screen. It says, and he, referring to the prince who comes right from the people, not the Messiah, but the one we know as the Antichrist, or that lawless world leader. And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. So 1 week is 7 years. There we go. The Antichrist will make a covenant with many for 7 years. There will be a 7-year covenant. And for half of the week, he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. So what we have here is a 7-year period of time that this world leader will make a strong covenant with many, but halfway through, right, for half the week, then he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. So what that tells us is that after this time, after the 69 weeks, then there will be at some point another 7 weeks, or another week, which will be 7 years. And halfway through that, this world leader, Antichrist, will put an end to sacrifice and offering, which means that it has to be reinstituted. There is not sacrifice and offerings as we live today in the age of grace. There is no temple to offer these sacrifices, and it has been put on hold. But there's a time coming that it will be reinstituted, and that's why we look so closely at Israel today and their determination to build a new temple. And they already have everything together to do this. If you've been following that, they're getting ready to build a temple in Jerusalem. And then they will re-implement the sacrifice and offerings. So now let's continue reading. And on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. So, within that 7 years, at the end of that 7 years, there is a time that the end is poured out on the desolator. Now, what's interesting is we have this in Daniel 9 that shows us that there's a 7-week period of time that we have come to call the 7 years of tribulation, or the Great Tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble. And we also find this piece in Daniel 9, about halfway through it, he puts an end to sacrifice and offering. What's interesting is in Revelation chapter 13, verse 5, we see that same insinuation. As I read in Revelation 13:5, and the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, speaking of the world leader, the Antichrist, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. Well, 42 months is 3.5 years of that 7-year period of time. So we have at the first part of the 7-year period of time, the first 3.5 years, that there's a sacrifice and offering because it's a 7-year covenant that he makes. But halfway through it, he breaks it. And then for the other 3.5 years, he is given this power, authority, to exercise authority for 42 months, for the second half of that 7-year period. Therefore, when in Daniel chapter 9, the prophecy was given in weeks, it made total sense because it fit into the prophetic calendar used in the biblical text of ages, onas, jubilees, and shemitahs. Right? So a shemitah is one of these is a 7-year period of time. So this time of trouble, this 70th shemitah of Daniel's prophecy, is a 7-year period of time. The Lord gave specific times and a date in the month that certain things were to occur or be observed. Listen to this. This is in Leviticus chapter 23. And we're going to look at one of the feasts of the Lord. Now, some people call these the feasts of Israel. They're not. All 7 feasts that we know of were feasts of the Lord because the Lord appointed them. The Jewish people, the Israelites, so forth, they didn't decide that they were going to have these feasts. The Lord appointed them. They are given, directed by the Lord. This is what we have in Leviticus chapter 23. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, these are the appointed feasts of the Lord." There you go. That should end any questions about that. The Lord appointed them. He spoke them, and he said, "These are my feasts. These are the feasts of the Lord, that you shall proclaim as holy convocations. They are my appointed feasts." Now, appointed means the Lord gave a specific date for these specific feasts to occur, and specific things were to be done on each one of these appointed feasts. Now we want to look at this Rosh Hashanah, or the Feast of Trumpets. Okay? And we're going to look at this in Leviticus chapter 23, and this is verses 23 through 25. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you shall observe a day of solemn rest, a memorial proclaimed with blasts of trumpets, a holy convocation. You shall do no any ordinary work, and you shall present a food offering to the Lord." So this is what we have as commonly known to and referred to as a Feast of Trumpets, but it's also known to the Jews as Rosh Hashanah, or their civil New Year. Okay, it takes place on the 7th month, which for us would be around September, but for the Hebrew tongue, it is Tishri. That's the name of the month, Tishri. And this was the original New Year feast for the civil calendar. Passover became the first day of Nisan, became the first day of the religious calendar for Israel. But the Feast of Trumpets is the first day of the civil calendar, and it was also known as the Day of New Beginnings. And it also celebrated creation. We're going to see this in just a minute. So Tishri 1 and 2 correlates with our month of September. Now here's just a graphic that shows the different feasts, and there's 7 of them. You can see starting on, which would be your right, would be Passover, and Nisan, and then there's unleavened bread, and there's first fruits. And then you see it goes to Pentecost. And then as you move around the calendar into the fall, which would be, like I said, around our September, there is trumpets, Day of Atonement, and then Tabernacles. So that's just kind of a little visual graphic of these feasts of the Lord. Okay. So on this particular feast of the Lord, on Tishri 1, trumpets, it was considered to recollect the sixth day of creation. And that's when God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over the cattle and all the earth. So that's what it's remembering, the sixth day of creation and the formation of man, the first man, Adam. Okay. And it also celebrates creation because it was new life. As we read in the book of Genesis about Noah, we find that that was also Noah's birthday, Tishri 1. We also find, it's very clear from the text, that the ark, after the flood, rested on dry ground on Tishri 1. Amazing, isn't it? Also, Tishri 1 was the day that the kings of Israel were coronated. That's when they were implemented into their role as king. That's when that was coronated, and that was the official day, Tishri 1, trumpets. And I think that this is very probable, and it'll make sense in just a little bit, that this is also the probable birthday of Yeshua, of Jesus Christ. Now, we all know that December 25th is not the birthday of Jesus Christ, of the Messiah, of Yeshua. That was assigned closer to 400 A.D., and it was incorporated into another festival, a pagan festival called Saturnalia. And the Roman Catholic Church decided to take Saturnalia and combine it with a new festivity acknowledging the birth of the Christ. Okay, so it was not reflective of when the Messiah was born, but it was a recognition of the birth of the Messiah, but they used an already existing pagan holiday and festivities called Saturnalia. Now, I have a whole nother video on that on this channel, the Cosmic Bible, God's Word for Today and Beyond. And so if you want more information on it, you can go back and look at the titles, and it'll state stuff about Christmas, and that's how you can look at it, okay? So we're going to look into the biblical text here in the book of Revelation again, and we're going to read in chapter 12. And this is the Revelator John, and he's recounting what he saw. And that is this, Revelation 12. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with her moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains, in the agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven, behold, a great red dragon, with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads were 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven, and cast them to the earth. The dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron, but her child was caught up to God and to his throne. Okay. So what's interesting for us to realize is that what John was seeing actually was a celestial event occurring with the sun, the moon, and stars. That there is a point in history that actually did take place. Okay? And it's all about the birth of Christ. And I'll just give you a little heads up that it occurred. That event was actually in the heavens with the Virgo, the Virgin, and the sun and the moon, and then the 12 stars on her head. And but we're going to look at the birth of Christ right now, and you are going to be familiar. Well, there's a picture of it. You can see that's Virgo, and where the sun and the moon and that was on a specific date. That was September 11, 3 BC. Now, you probably are going to be familiar with this Old Testament prophecy from Micah chapter 5, verse 2, because it's about the birth of the Messiah. And it reads this way: "But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me the one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from old, from ancient days." So this tells us in general that the Messiah was to be born in the town of Bethlehem, or in that area. Right? And so this is the Messiah, and he is to be born, the ruler of Israel. But there's another prophecy that tells us more specifically, actually exacting, to where in Bethlehem the Messiah was to be born. And many people are not as familiar with this piece. For some reason, it's not often taught in churches, but it's right there, and it comes before Micah chapter 5, verse 2. This is Micah 4:8. It says, "As for you, tower of the flock, hill of the daughter of Zion, to you it will come. Even the former dominion will come, the kingdom of the daughter of Jerusalem." So here is a prophecy about the kingdom and the king coming to a specific place called the Tower of the Flock. Now, the Tower of the Flock is an English translation of a Hebrew term which is called Migdal Edar. Migdal Edar. Let's see. There it is. It's an actual location. It has a longitude and latitude. You could plug in GPS coordinates and find it. It's called Migdal Edar. It's a real place. And it's from that place specifically that is prophesied the kingship for Jerusalem will come. That is the Messiah. This place, Migdal Edar, it does first appear in Genesis chapter 35, verse 21, where Jacob buried Rachel after she gave birth to Benjamin. And it's mentioned other places in the biblical text as well. But this Migdal Edar is just translated as Tower of the Flock, but it's a real place. And it was a lookout post for shepherds as they would watch over their flocks. It was located just north of Bethlehem, the city of David. What makes Migdal Edar, this Tower of the Flock, is very specific. What flocks? Sheep. What made this tower special was that the bottom portion of the tower was used as the sheep care facility that served as a manger where Jerusalem's sacrificial lambs were birthed and inspected. Okay, does that make sense? History has shown us that there was a specific group of shepherds who watched over specific flocks of sheep outside of Bethlehem. And what we learn is that the shepherds mentioned in the biblical text were specially trained to follow the requirements of the law for the sheep that were to be used as a sacrifice. Okay? There was one place where these sheep were born, and they were inspected by this select group of shepherds. And this is called Migdal Edar. That's what it was, the Tower of the Flock. So when the ewes would give birth to the lambs for the sacrifices, right? When they would give birth, these shepherds were trained in the requirements for these sacrificial lambs. And they would take the lamb and they would inspect it, and they would wrap it in swaddling clothes so that it might not injure itself before it could walk. Okay. So they inspected to make sure that the lamb was for purity and then without defect. And once that was determined, then they were admitted into the special flock that was to be used for sacrifices. Now, this, according to Micah 4:8, is where the Messiah was to be born, specifically in Bethlehem. And this is where the shepherds found the baby Jesus. You see, it wasn't just some shepherds somewhere with some flocks of sheep that the angel appeared and announced the birth of the Christ child. It was to a specific group of shepherds in a specific location that were familiar with the tower of the flock. And when they were told, you will find the child wrapped in swaddling clothes in the manger, they knew exactly where to go. They didn't run through, they went directly to the manger. They didn't wander around knocking on doors and going to different stables and caves looking for the child. They hastened there. What the words tell us. They knew where to go, and that is where they found the Lamb of God. Was born where the lambs are born for sacrifice. Absolutely incredible. So, it's very probable that this happened on what we call the Feast of Trumpets, because that correlates with the vision that John had in Revelation chapter 12. Okay? Because that's when this celestial event actually did take place, and it aligns with the time of Jesus' birth. Absolutely incredible. Now,